Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily Update YouTube channel. Today's topics: the young and the restless spoilers, shock. Audra had always walked into rooms like she was born to own them. But lately, even her strongest strides couldn't quiet the whispering pulse of danger tracking her every move. The shadows were thickening again. Not just from corporate enemies or lovers scorned, but something more visceral, something older. And it terrified her in a way she hadn't felt since she first arrived in Genoa City, with nothing but ambition, curated charm, and secrets stitched into every thread of her identity. She had always known this moment would come, the day when the life she built on her own terms would be challenged by the one she'd tried to leave behind. And it was happening now. In the mirror, in her calls with Nate, in the way Claire looked at her sideways. But mostly it was happening in Nice, the place where too many truths had unraveled. Audrey Charles had never been anyone's pawn, or so she believed. Her arrival in Genoa City years ago had been written off by the elite as another fast-talking social climber. Hoping to break into the business world on the backs of powerful men, they expected her to cling, flatter, fail. But Audra flipped the script. She learned fast, maneuvered faster, and soon found herself toe-to-toe with industry titans who had once dismissed her. She could outplay them, out-negotiate them, outlast them. And she did. But with each victory came a heavier cost. They began to dig. They wanted to know who she really was, who backed her, where she came from. She had answers ready, of course. A childhood scraped together in low-rent motel, no known family, and education paid through sheer will. Most of that was true, but not all. The truth was more dangerous than fiction. Audra's father wasn't a ghost or a name long buried. He was Rafael del Toro, a name that had vanished from international headlines over a decade ago after selling off vast portions of his transatlantic empire. A tycoon with holdings in real estate, technology, military contracting, and art smuggling. The kind of man whose enemies either disappeared or were bought off. To most of the world, Rafael had faded into philanthropic silence, operating behind foundations and anonymous trust funds. But to Audra, he was a specter, a towering figure whose shadow she had spent her entire adult life trying to escape. She hadn't spoken to him in 7 years. Not after the last blowout, when she announced she was leaving the family estate in Barcelona and moving to the United States. "I will not be controlled by your legacy," she had said then, trembling in defiance. And Rafael, in his quiet, thunderous way, had responded, "One day you will learn blood is not optional. It is destiny." But Audra did not believe in destiny. She believed in decisions. And hers had been to never look back until now. The moment Rafael learned she was in Nice, thanks to a brief mention in a leaked Newman Enterprises report, everything changed. He didn't call. He didn't send one of his discreet European agents. He got on a private plane and landed in France in less than 10 hours. When he arrived at her hotel, security flanked both sides of the elevator. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. The concierge knew better than to question anything. Rafael moved through marble halls like a king returning to a lost province. And when he found her suite empty, she was out walking, trying to make sense of her collapsing relationship with Nate. He waited, standing by the window, eyes locked on the Mediterranean, silent, patient, fuming. What Audra didn't know was that Rafael had already read the dossier. He had her followed since the first whisper of scandal appeared in Genoa. Nate Hastings. That was the name that kept appearing beside hers. Rafael had watched hours of video footage, parking garage arguments, conference room whispers, security camera stills of the two leaving the Newman Tower late into the night. At first, he assumed Nate was an accessory. But then came the reports. Emotional manipulation, power plays, strategic alienation. Rafael, a man who had built empires through ruthlessness, recognized abuse when he saw it. And while he had tolerated, even admired Audra's dangerous liaison when they were strategic, he would not abide weakness forced upon his daughter by any man. When Audra returned to the suite that evening, she knew he was there before she saw him. The air had changed. It smelled like firewood and fury. And then she saw him. The broad silhouette, the gray suit, the impossible posture. For a moment, she became a child again. But then she hardened. She had to. Rafael didn't speak immediately. When he did, his voice was low and surgical. "You built your world, Audra. I respected that. But I will not watch it be destroyed by a coward with a soft face and a weak spine." She tried to explain. He didn't want explanations. He wanted action. The next morning, Nate stepped into the cafe courtyard near the harbor. Having received a cryptic message about a meeting that Audra insisted would bring closure, instead, he was greeted by two security men who wordlessly flanked him as Raphael stood from a table. Nate recognized the older man instantly, not from press photos, but from the weight of his presence. "You heard her," Raphael said. Emotionally, strategically, repeatedly. "That is a crime in my world." Nate tried to hold his ground, but Raphael was already moving. His fists struck like a trained mercenary's. Years of boxing and discipline behind every bone-crushing inch. Nate staggered back, but Raphael didn't stop. "You will stay away from her. You will disappear, or I will make you disappear." The assault shocked the few onlookers who weren't cleared away by Raphael's men. But more shocking was what came next. Raphael's attention turned not just to Nate, but to everyone who had, in his view, endangered his daughter. His list was long: Victor Newman, the patriarch who had allowed chaos to fester under his company roof and done nothing when Audra's name became a punching bag; Kyle Abbott, the smug rich boy who had used seduction and betrayal as tools in a French trap; and others, journalists, board members, and so-called friends who had stood idle while Audra bled behind her smiles. Raphael didn't wage wars with bullets anymore. He used economics. He made calls. Stocks dipped, deals stalled. Audits were launched. Newman Enterprises' European division suddenly faced a formal investigation from an agency no one had even heard of until now. Jabou's Parisian supplier reneged on a crucial deal, citing ethical inconsistencies. No one could prove the connections, but Jack knew. Victor knew. They had seen this playbook before. Not from Raphael directly, but from men like him. The difference was Raphael never played alone. He played to eliminate. Audra, meanwhile, found herself in the impossible middle. She had wanted protection, yes, but not obliteration. Not this kind of retaliation. She begged her father to stop. But Raphael, once awakened, did not retreat. "You are mine, Audra, you have my blood. And the world will fear what happens when that blood is provoked." She tried to separate herself again, but it was too late. Lines had been crossed. Fates were now entangled. Victor, never one to fold under threat, began crafting a countermeasure. He reached out to old allies in Brussels, men who owed him favors from wars not listed in newspapers. Kyle attempted to repair what he could with Claire, hoping to avoid being caught in a storm that was no longer metaphorical. Jack started making calls to ensure Jabou's European partners knew where his true loyalties lay. And Nate vanished. One day he was there. The next his apartment was empty. But the question lingered. Who was Audrey Charles really? She was the daughter of a billionaire shadow king. She was a survivor of boardroom jungles. She was the victim of men who underestimated her and the architect of her own ambition. She was a woman with a last name no one dared speak until now. And she was about to decide whether her future belonged to the empire she ran from, or the one she might now inherit by force. Because Raphael had not come to rescue her. He had come to remind everyone what happens when you wound a wolf's only daughter. If you'd like, I can continue expanding this into a multi-part storyline. Next chapter could follow Victor's retaliation, or perhaps the truth about Audra's mother, or whether Nate returns under a new identity. Just say the word. Audra's reckoning, blood, betrayal, and the man between. The stillness in the nice air had long since vanished, replaced now by a rising storm of conflicted loyalties and dangerous power moves that none of them could reverse. Audra Charles, once a woman defined by her careful control, was watching her world spiral. She had always built her empire in silence, one calculated relationship, one carefully masked ambition at a time. But control was the first casualty when too many men, too many with something to prove, began colliding around her with motives sharpened by ego and fear. And in the middle of the blast radius, stood Holden. Holden wasn't just another romantic diversion in Audra life. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. He was the calm between storms. The one man who had seen her before the war paint, before the power dresses and press statements. They had met years ago, briefly when she was still a student living under a pseudonym and he was managing digital expansion for a European hedge fund. He'd caught her when she fell in front of a cafe in Vienna. They'd laughed, and from that moment something impossibly pure lingered between them. Untouched by ambition, untainted by power. When they reconnected years later, their dynamic was different. She was stronger, harder, sharper, but part of that innocence lingered. It was Holden who noticed the shadows. It was Holden who noticed the shadows gathering around her in Genoa City. It was Holden who heard the rumors about Nate's manipulations, and the way Victor's silence echoed as complicity. And it was Holden who, in an impulsive act wrapped in good intentions, reached out to the one man who had always protected Audra from the shadows, her father. But Rafael del Toro was not a father in any traditional sense. He was empire incarnate, a man who built wealth not to pass on but to control. He had orchestrated elections, collapsed currencies, made presidents kneel, and buried enemies in contracts that never expired. To him, Audra wasn't a daughter. She was an heir in denial, a bloodline gone rogue. He didn't understand rebellion unless it could be monetized. So when Holden told him about Nate, about the emotional trauma, the manipulation, the public humiliation, Raphael didn't hesitate. He flew to France and everything changed. Holden thought he was protecting her. But what he brought was a lion into a den of wounded men. Raphael's arrival, his confrontation with Nate, his calculated threats. They didn't simply end with a black eye. They shattered a fragile equilibrium and awakened the worst parts in everyone. Nate, humiliated and bruised, walked away from that confrontation, not merely angry, but transformed. He had lost more than pride. He had lost control. And in losing that, he returned to the instincts that had always lurked beneath his polished surface: domination, suspicion, and revenge. The next time Nate saw Audra, there was no apology, no reconciliation. There was only venom. She found him waiting inside her suite, uninvited, pacing like a caged predator. His words were not loud, but each syllable was laced with accusation. "You brought him here," he spat. "You knew he'd come. You played me." Audra's eyes widened. "I didn't know," she began, but he cut her off. "You never really chose me, did you? Just another pawn until the billionaire daddy comes to clean up your mess." She tried to walk past him, but he blocked her path. The anger in his eyes had metastasized into something darker, a cocktail of jealousy, humiliation, and old traumas. And then he snapped. The slap wasn't hard enough to knock her down, but it was hard enough to shatter something sacred. Audra recoiled in silence, not out of fear. She had faced worse. But it was the betrayal that numbed her. This wasn't Nate, the executive, the strategist, the lover. This was Nate, the frightened man, cornered and lashing out. Holden heard about the assault an hour later from Audra's assistant. He was already back at his hotel when the message came through. Without thinking, he rushed to her side, only to find her in tears, sitting on the floor beside an untouched glass of wine, her phone buzzing with unanswered calls. She didn't say anything for several minutes. When she finally looked up, her voice was barely audible. "He called me a traitor." Holden's first instinct was fury. His second was guilt. He had brought this. He had thought Raphael would scare Nate off, not ignite him. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Now he had to undo the damage. But it wasn't so simple. Nate had snapped. And broken men do not return quietly to the shadows. What Holden didn't realize was that Nate had already begun laying plans for retaliation. His pride could not handle the loss, and his fear had fomented into obsession. He no longer saw Holden as a neutral party. He saw him as the true enemy, the interloper who had not only stolen Audrey UNC's affection, but turned her against him, using her father's wrath as a weapon. In Nate's eyes, Holden was the spark that had lit the fuse, and he intended to snuff that spark out. Rumors soon began swirling in Genoa City. Whispers of an investigation into Holden's prior firm in Zurich, audits of transactions connected to Raphael's old shell companies, a leaked dossier accusing Holden of insider trading. Anonymous, of course, but detailed enough to raise red flags at multiple firms. The kind of whisper campaign only someone like Nate could orchestrate with a single text to a friend at the SEC. Holden's name began appearing in meetings as a liability. His contacts stopped responding, and when he tried to book a return flight home, his passport flagged a routine review. It was only then that Audra realized just how far Nate was willing to go. She confronted him one final time, this time on neutral ground, the rooftop of the Geneva Hotel, where they had once shared laughter. Now it was cold, wind-whipped, silent. Nate looked thinner, colder, not entirely present. She pleaded with him, "Let him go. This isn't justice. This is obsession." But Nate, arms crossed, eyes glazed, responded with a single sentence. "You made your choice. Now you live with the fallout." Meanwhile, Raphael watched from the sidelines with disturbing calm. He had expected retaliation. He had even calculated how far Nate might go. But what interested him was not the personal grudge. It was the opportunity. Now he said to his private advisor, "We take it all." Raphael's plan wasn't about Nate anymore, it was about Genoa City. With his daughter's name now tied to headlines, with Holden vulnerable and Nate unstable, he saw a gap in the city's armor. If he couldn't have Audra's love, he would at least secure her legacy by owning everything she once tried to escape. One board seat at a time, one acquisition after another. Victor Newman saw the shift coming and began mobilizing. Jack Abbott tightened his alliances. Claire, still recovering from her own heartbreak, began quietly supporting Audra, two women once wary of each other, now finding common ground in the wreckage left by men. And Audra, she stood on the edge of everything, her past crashing into her present, her father becoming both shield and storm, her lover turning into a ghost she feared might haunt her forever. She didn't know if she would ever forgive Holden for bringing Raphael back. She didn't know if she would survive Nate's wrath. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. The episode of The Young and the Restless, set in Genoa City, revolves around escalating tensions and power plays among key characters as they navigate personal and professional conflicts. The narrative weaves three major storylines: the launch of Abbott Communications, the strategic battle over media narratives involving Newman Media and Kane Ashby, and the simmering scandal surrounding Claire Grace, Kyle Abbott, and the manipulative influence of Audra Charles. Sally Spectra and Billy Abbott are preparing to launch Abbott Communications, a media company poised to challenge Newman Media's dominance. Sally's confidence is bolstered by the hiring of Audra Charles, a savvy and ruthless coup with a reputation for navigating chaos and leveraging power. Meanwhile, Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson strategize to counter Kane Ashby's silence following a damaging expose, anticipating a calculated counterattack parallel to these corporate maneuvers. Claire Grace finds herself under scrutiny from journalist Holden Novak, whose probing questions hint at a scandal involving her relationship with Kyle Abbott and rumors about parentage, a sensitive issue threatening to unravel the Abbott family's carefully guarded secrets. Claire confronts Audra in a tense public confrontation, accusing her of colluding with Claire's grandfather to undermine her relationship with Kyle for financial and political gain. Audra denies the allegations but agrees to an audit to clear her name, highlighting the blurred lines between loyalty, power, and manipulation. At the same time, Daniel Romalotti faces a personal and professional crossroads, inspired by Tessa Porter's ambitious multimedia project that offers him a chance at creative redemption. Their collaboration represents a hopeful contrast to the city's cutthroat atmosphere. The episode ends with the characters' intertwined ambitions and conflicts setting the stage for an intense week ahead, marked by secrets, alliances, betrayals, and the relentless pursuit of influence in Genoa City. Sally Spectra and Billy Abbott prepare to launch Abbott Communications, signaling a new media war. Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson face off against Kane Ashby's silent but strategic counterattack. Audra Charles, the new who is a cunning and ruthless figure whose loyalties are questioned. Claire Grace confronts Audra publicly, accusing her of manipulative collusion related to family scandals. Daniel Romalotti finds creative renewal through Tessa Porter's innovative multimedia project. Holden Novak's investigative questioning threatens to expose deep family secrets. The episode ends with mounting tensions and fragile alliances shaping Genoa City's future. Power and narrative control are central themes. The battle between Abbott Communications and Newman Media illustrates how controlling media narratives in Genoa City is tantamount to wielding power. Each faction seeks to dictate public perception, recognizing that reputation can elevate or destroy. The media companies are not just business ventures but strategic weapons in a city where image is everything. Audra Charles embodies the ruthless pragmatism of corporate survival. Her character is a study in calculated loyalty and strategic ambiguity. Audra's deployment of leverage and manipulation reflects how modern executives operate in high-stakes environments, balancing personal ambition with the demands of power brokers. Her refusal to show vulnerability and readiness to weaponize ambiguity underline the cutthroat nature of her role. Claire Grace's storyline highlights the personal cost of public scandal. Claire's struggle with rumors about her relationship and potential family secrets shows how private lives are weaponized in Genoa City. Her public confrontation with Audra underscores how women, especially those caught in the family's crossfire, must navigate Her public confrontation with Audra underscores how women, especially those caught in the family's crossfire, must navigate accusations that threaten to define them unfairly. Claire's resilience and demand for truth reflect a broader commentary On agency and reputation, Daniel Romalotti's creative rebirth offers a counterpoint to the city's chaos. Unlike the corporate battles, Daniel's artistic journey with Tessa symbolizes hope and personal transformation. Their project, blending interactive art with storytelling, suggests that amidst relentless ambition and conflict, there remains space for authentic expression and healing. This subplot enriches the narrative by showing different forms of power: creative versus political hold-in. Novak's investigative approach reveals the complexity of uncovering truth. His style of questioning and patience with silence embodies modern investigative journalism's subtlety. The episode shows how uncovering truth in a place like Genoa City requires careful navigation of rumors, alliances, and the power structures that seek to suppress or distort facts. His presence adds tension and the possibility of exposure. The dynamics of loyalty and betrayal are fluid and transactional. Across the episode, loyalty is portrayed less as an emotional bond and more as a strategic alignment of outcomes, especially with characters like Audra and the corporate players. This transactional view reflects the precariousness of relationships in environments shaped by ambition and survival, where alliances shift based on opportunity and risk. The balance between public image and private reality drives conflict. The episode emphasizes how characters must manage the gap between what is shown to the public and what happens behind closed doors. This duality creates constant tension and drama, as secrets threaten to emerge and reputations hang in the balance. It also highlights the cost of living in a city obsessed with appearances and legacy. The episode expertly intertwines personal and professional stakes, showing how in Genoa City, no aspect of life is untouched by the broader battles for power and influence. Sally Spectra's determination to launch Abbott Communications on schedule is not just about business success but about staking a claim in the city's media landscape, challenging the dominance of the Newman Empire. Her choice of Audra Charles as Coup is strategic, bringing in a figure who understands the necessity of decisive, even ruthless, action to survive and thrive. This decision immediately sets up tension with other characters, especially as Audra's connections and motivations come under scrutiny. Adam Newman's cautious approach to Kane Ashby's silence reveals a sophisticated understanding of strategic patience and information warfare. Rather than rushing to respond, Adam recognizes that silence can be a weapon and that Kane's counterattack will likely be subtle and multifaceted, involving alliances and market maneuvers rather than overt confrontation. This tactical battle between media titans mirrors real-world corporate rivalries where public perception and behind-the-scenes moves are equally critical. Claire Grace's storyline adds emotional depth and complexity, illustrating how family, secrets and rumors can devastate personal relationships and reputations. Her confrontation with Audra is a pivotal moment that brings private grievances into the public eye, challenging the carefully constructed facades. Audra's denial and eventual agreement to an audit raise questions about transparency and trust in power dynamics. Claire's courage in standing up publicly while maintaining composure highlights her growth and resilience in a world that often tries to silence women's voices. Daniel Romalotti's collaboration with Tessa Porter provides a refreshing narrative contrast. Their creative project, blending multimedia art with historical storytelling, symbolizes the possibility of reclaiming agency and narrative control through authentic expression. This subplot suggests that while the city's power struggles rage, there remains space for personal healing and innovation, offering hope for renewal beyond the corporate wars. Holden Novak's investigative presence represents the looming threat of exposure that hangs over all characters. His skillful questioning and measured approach embody the challenges of uncovering truth in a landscape dense with deception and guarded secrets. His interactions with Claire hint at deeper layers of the Abbott family's hidden history, setting the stage for revelations that could reshape alliances and power structures. The episode's emphasis on loyalty as a function of aligned outcomes rather than emotion reflects a cynical but realistic view of relationships in high-stakes environments. Characters like Audra navigate these waters with practiced ease, knowing when to shift allegiance or maintain distance to protect their interests. This transactional approach is echoed across the narrative, underscoring the precariousness of trust in Genoa City. Finally, the episode's closing moments, with Claire receiving a threatening message and the arrival of Nate Hastings with Audra Charles, encapsulate the ongoing volatility and complexity of the city's social and power networks. The interplay of personal pain, public image, and strategic maneuvering creates a rich tapestry that promises further drama and conflict. Asterisk in some. This episode of The Young and the Restless asterisk is a masterclass in layered storytelling that balances interpersonal drama with broader themes of power, loyalty, and identity. It sets up multiple plotlines with high stakes, ensuring that the coming week in Genoa City will be as unpredictable as it is captivating.